Today's episode is brought to you by Soul Ring. Turn to Jace the Mind Sculptor? Yes, please. Hour of Devastation is here. Which cards should you consider for your cube? What made the cut? What archetypes do they fit in? And many more. Find out the top 10 cards in Hour of Devastation today on Playing with Power. Hello and welcome to Playing with Power, where we talk about the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. In this episode, we're going to talk about the top 10 cards and the latest set called Hour of Devastation. So, how do I determine what cards belong in this list? Well, first of all, I don't just look for the most powerful cards from the set. Whenever I look at a set, I look at multiple things. First of all, does a card fit my color strategy? Whenever I'm looking for a cube, usually my colors do specific things from within that particular cube. And whenever I'm evaluating a card, I want to make sure that that card's color or colors fits my color strategy for my cube. The next thing I look at is, does it fit in my curve? Yes, an ability might be really good, but if this is a very high-powered cube, which my personal cube is, I need to make sure that it can fit appropriately with the curve, especially in regards to its color strategy. The next thing I look at is whether or not it fits into my archetype strategy. Each of my colors do different things according to their appropriate archetypes. I have support cards, main cards, and cards that cross-pollinate between archetypes. And I need to make sure that the card that I'm putting in there, especially in a color and in a curve, will also fit its archetype. The next thing I'll look at is whether or not this fits my power level. And what that basically means is that I'm not going to put really weak cards into an overly powerful cube. So I'm not going to put an insanely slow card with Delve into a strategy that's really heavy on aggro or reanimator. And just like I wouldn't put something like Soul Ring or Sensei's Top into a Peasant or Pauper cube. The next thing I would look at is what card, if I put this into my cube, will this have to replace? My cube isn't one that's just ever growing all the time to create uneven balances in numbers. I actually have to remove a card to put in another one. So I need to evaluate that when I'm looking at a card to see whether or not this is a card I want to replace. And if I am replacing it, does it fit in with the overall strategy of what I'm replacing? The next thing I look at is how likely is this card going to be cast? Depending on the power level of the cube, I need to make sure that this card is actually going to see real play. If it's a card with a really aggressive cost or a really restrictive color requirements, is it just going to end up in everybody's sideboard immediately? And if it does, then I probably shouldn't include it into the cube. The last thing I look at is whether or not a card has the X factor. And what I mean by the X factor is basically the cool factor. Is it basically fun to see in the cube? Is it fun to attempt to cast it in a game? Does it make the cube experience more fun to see it? And a lot of times this, depending upon the card, can give extra weight to certain aspects that I wouldn't normally consider with the previous points. If it has a really cool X factor, it makes for a more fun experience. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the top 10 cards for Hour of Devastation. Number 10 is Firebrand Archer. Firebrand Archer is 1 and a red for a 2/1 human archer, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Firebrand Archer deals 1 damage to each opponent. So Firebrand Archer is a really great addition to red in the cube. It fits really well into its color, into its curve, and into its appropriate archetypes. This card can be drafted into a Spells Matter, or a Burn, or a Red Aggro, and can even be splashed into some Storm archetypes as a support card. It is also a common, so it fits really well into Pauper and Peasant cubes as well. As far as downsides go, its power and toughness ratio leaves a little bit to be desired. You're not really going to be swinging for the fences with this particular card because it's just going to die immediately. It fits really well, as said earlier, into the Spells Matter, Burn, and Red Aggro archetypes. It's really good against mid-range because you're going to start to burn them out before they can really stabilize their board. It's not a great matchup against Burn or a mirror match, disruptive aggro, or any sort of white weenie strategy. It's just not going to stay on the board long enough. Number 9, we have Neheb the Eternal. Neheb the Eternal is 3 and 2 red for a 4/6 legendary creature, zombie, minotaur, warrior, and that just fills up that whole card slot. It has Afflict 3, which basically means that whenever it becomes blocked, the defending layer will lose X life. In this case, it'll be 3. And at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you'll add red to your mana pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So as far as this card goes, this card plays really well into, once again, the Spells Matter and Burn archetypes. This is one of those fun cards. It has a new Afflict mechanic that lets an opponent choose what type of damage to take in combat, either the Afflict damage or the damage that you take from just not blocking the creature. The mana you will produce during this post-combat phase doesn't just come from the Hev itself, so it's not just coming from the Afflict or just from his power, it's coming from all sources of damage that your opponent takes before your post-combat main phase. So that's really, really positive if you're playing a burn strategy or something that's going to take their life down. You can actually end up adding a whole lot of mana to your mana pool in your post-combat main phase. Also, this card's power and toughness is really good for its curve. A 4/6 for 5 is right there, right in the mid-range, especially in a color that kind of peters out around that time. As far as downsides or cons go, I never like cards that allow an opponent to make a choice for you, and the Afflict mechanic does precisely that. It also doesn't produce mana of any color, and this is red, so I'm not, that's really kind of a nitpicky point. I would like to see any color, but I might be asking for a little bit much at that point. It fits really well into the Burn, Storm, Spells Matter, and Aggro archetypes. It's also, once again, really good against mid-range. It's not great against a Fatty Cheat, Super Ramp, or Reanimator archetype, because by the time that you're going to get to 5 mana, a lot of times these archetypes have something much larger and can deal with a 4/6 much earlier than you can by turn 5. Alright, number 8 is Nicol Bolas the God Pharaoh. It is 4 in Grixis colors, which is blue, black, and red for a 7 loyalty Planeswalker Bolas. It has 4 abilities. Its +2 ability is target opponent exiles cards from the top of his or her library until he or she exiles a non-land card. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost, so you get to steal something. Each opponent exiles 2 cards from his or her hand as its second ability, which is a +1. Its -4 ability is Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh, deals 7 damage to target opponent or creature an opponent controls. And then its ultimate, which is a -12, is exile each non-land permanent your opponents control. So this is a Planeswalker that has 4 abilities. Every one of his abilities is pretty good. You can cast your opponent's spells, mill their lands, disrupt their hand, burn their creatures, or just smack them in the face for 7. His final ability is tough to get, so I don't see that going off for very many games. His starting loyalty is strong as well, so if your opponents want to get rid of him, they'll really have to work for it. So as far as cons go, this card is expensive to cast. It costs 7, and I know the old Nicol Bolas cost 8, and so it is saving 1 black mana doing that, but even so, this card is in Grixis colors, so this is going to force you into 3 colors. So many cubes shine at a 2-color combo for their decks that they draft, so this one is a little bit harder to be able to put into a deck. This will go really good in the mid-range and control archetypes. It's really good against Super Ramp, Storm, Fatty Cheat, and Spells Matter archetypes. Not so good against White Weenie, Aggro, or Burn archetypes because they're just going to overwhelm you by the time that you get to 7 mana. Okay, number 7 on the list is Imaginary Threats. It's 2 and 2 blue for an instant. Creatures target opponent controls attack this turn if able, and during that player's next untap step, creatures he or she controls do not untap. It also has a cycling of 2, and this card is a great tempo for blue. This card will leave your opponent open for 2 turns. They also cannot activate any tap abilities of their creatures in their next turn as well. This card is also almost never dead because of its cycling cost. Don't need this card for a particular matchup, cycle it away and draw another. This card will fit into just about any archetype with blue, as it is a really good answer card. It also fits into Peasant Cubes since it's an uncommon. As far as downsides go, making your opponent attack you doesn't always work itself out against super aggressive strategies, so sometimes this card's timing can be a little bit tricky. This works really well in a Spells Matter or Aggro archetype. It's really good against Fatty Cheat and Super Ramp as they go for a more singular creature strategy. Not really good against Aggro or White Weenie strategies because they're looking to attack anyway. So you're really, to have them attack you is not a downside on their part. They're wanting to do that to begin with. Okay, number 6 on our list is Angel of Condemnation. It is 2 and 2 white for a 3/3 Flying Vigilance Angel. It has 2 activated abilities. You can pay 2 and a white, tap it, and exile another target creature. Return that card into the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. You can also pay 2 and a white, tap it, and exert Angel of Condemnation, which basically means that it won't untap during your next untap step. And you can exile another target creature until Angel of Condemnation leaves the battlefield. So a 3/3 Flying Vigilance for 4 is really great on curve for a white weenie strategy. It has 2 abilities which are extremely useful as well. The first ability really goes well with a flicker archetype in your cube. Simply flicker a card and get extra value out of it, and the second ability is good too. Basically, your opponent's going to have to hold off on some big threats until they can deal with this particular angel. You can attack and then activate an ability with this creature, which is also great for doing double duty on this card. As far as downsides go, I would like to have seen a better power and toughness for its cost. Usually most 4-costing angels are 4/4 and not 3/3. I understand that there's vigilance on there, but it would have been nicer to see that, because that's putting it more into the lightning bolt range, which I'm not a fan of. I'm also not a huge fan of the exert mechanic. So this card isn't going to be able to deal with your opponent's creatures every turn, basically just every other turn if you're using exert. So it fits really well into the Flicker and White Weenie archetypes. It's really great against Reanimation, Fatty Cheat, and Super Ramp archetypes because you can deal with those creatures as they're coming onto the board. It's not great against Aggro, Burn, or Spells Matter because those archetypes are 1, going to have so many creatures you can't deal with them, or 2, just no creatures at all, so this card's kind of dead. Okay, halfway through, number 5 on our list is Bontu's Last Reckoning. It is 1 and 2 black for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures, lands you control don't untap during your next untap step. So this is a very good card in my opinion, and I know that right now the internet is kind of has a mixed view on this. It's a board wipe, in black, and for 3 mana. That's pretty good. Many black board wipes have very large costs, Decree of Pain, and those types of things have really high mana costs. They give you extra things, or they do extra things, but it really costs a lot to really get that particular card to wipe out all the creatures. The only aggressive one is really Damnation, which is the color shifted of Wrath of God, and that's why it's so expensive, because it's most aggressively costed. So it's really good. It's a great card. It is 1 and 2 black, and your lands don't untap. So depending on how this is set up, if you're using artifacts, that's not as big of a problem. However, since this does affect your lands, it is a tempo swing, but the entire board will have to be rebuilt. So depending upon when you cast this card, it can be really good for you or really bad for you. Against an aggro strategy, this can be a really huge hit because in those particular cases, they can rebuild their boards pretty quickly, unless it's mid to late game, and then they probably petered out their hand, and so it's not so bad. But basically, if your lands are not untapping, you've got a situation where you're actually paying 6 for this, just spread out over 2 turns. This is really great against aggro, White Weenie, and Token. This is not great against Spells Matter, Storm, or Burn because they're just not going to have that many creatures on the board to have to wipe through. And this also fits really well into multiple archetypes. So if you're running black, this is actually a pretty good answer card to run, especially with its aggressive cost. And it would also find a really good home in a disruptive aggro strategy as well. Number 4 on our list is one of the split cards from Hour of Devastation, and it is Leave to Chance. It is the white-red rare from Hour of Devastation. So Leave is 1 and a white for an instant. Return any number of target permanents you own to your hand. And Chance is a 3 and a red sorcery with Aftermath, meaning you can only cast it from your graveyard and discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. So this card does some very good work for the colors it belongs in. So as a point of note, you do not need both colors to play this card. Maybe you only want one side or the other, and that's okay. The Leave side of this, which is white, is great against sweepers or to protect against removal. The Chance side is great to find answers if the one in your hand are no good anymore. Like, so you have a burn strategy and you've got 3 lands. You can rummage away your Chance and then cast Chance to get rid of those lands and find something else inside of your deck. It is also good for filling your yard with reanimation targets. Boros colors need a great card like this, and I'm really glad to see it inside of Hour of Devastation. So as far as downsides go, the aftermath portion of Chance is harder to cast if you don't cast Leave first. So while you don't necessarily need both colors to use this card, it's gonna be much easier to cast Chance if your deck already supports both colors. This goes really well into White Weenie, aggro, and in some edge cases, Reanimator archetypes. It's really good against mid-range and mass land destruction, and it's not great against disruptive aggro where they're talking about exiling your graveyard or disrupting your hand through discard outlets. Okay, number 3 on this list is Hour of Devastation. I know the set's name is Hour of Devastation, but they also have a card named Hour of Devastation. It is 3 and 2 red for a sorceries. All creatures lose indestructible until end of turn, and Hour of Devastation deals 5 damage to each creature and each non-bolus planeswalker. So the namesake of the set itself was given to a really good card. This is a great way to deal with indestructible creatures in a color that is very weak against it. Red deals with creatures by burning them out, and indestructible gets around that, so you're kind of dead in the water. So this card is right on par with Curve. It will hose your opponent's board in one fell swoop, and the casting cost is amazing for its ability. And the ability to hit planeswalkers on top of it all, it just makes it an all-around great card. So as far as downsides go, this hits your creatures and planeswalkers as well. This is not just your opponents. This also does not hit players. So a lot of the types of cards that do sweeping things things like earthquake effects and whatnot will hit creatures and players. This one does not do that. If for some reason you do have a non-bolus planeswalker, a bolus-based planeswalker, you're going to be okay. But every other planeswalker is basically going to get burned for at least 5 if you cast this. This goes really well into the Burn and Spells Matter archetypes, and it's really good against White Weenie, aggro, and anything with Avacyn Angel of Hope. And it's bad against creature-like decks and mirror matchups. So if you're playing Burn and they're playing Burn, it's not really going to get you where you want to be. And anything with a creature-like deck like Reanimator that just plays like 1 or 2 really big creatures, this isn't really going to be able to deal with them. Okay, number 2 is Ramunap Excavator. It is 2 and a green for a 2/3 Naga Cleric, and it says you may play land cards from your graveyard. So, want another Crucible of Worlds in your cube? Now you have it. A decent power toughness for its ability, while not entirely bulletproof, this card does give you more consistency from any deck that wants Crucible of Worlds. Lands Matter and Mass Land Destruction decks are going to love this card. So as far as its downsides go, it is a creature. So it's very easy to get rid of creatures inside of Cube. Okay? So this will fit really well into a Lands Matter, Dredge, Mass Land Destruction, or Wildfire archetype. It's really good against any sort of land destruction. So if anybody's playing that against you, you can easily recover from it. It's also really good against Fatty Cheap and Super Ramp archetypes. It's not good against Burn, White Weenie, or aggro strategies because this is more suited for more of a mid-range strategy. Okay, and now we have reached the final one, and number 1 in Hour of Devastation is Mirage Mirror. Mirage Mirror is a 3-costing artifact, and it has the activated ability of 2, and Mirage Mirror becomes a copy of target artifact, creature, or enchantment, or land until end of turn. This is the best card in the set, hands down. The most important thing to note about this card is that it isn't restricted to only your own permanents. This is also your opponent's permanents. This allows you to have 2 of any permanent on the board, and that is really great in what is usually defined as a singleton format. Want to make a copy of Consecrated Sphinx and fill your hand? Want a copy of Gaia's Cradle and double your mana? Want a copy of your opponent's Grizzlebrand? Want a copy of Thran Dynamo or Mana Vault? You want to make a copy of Mirari's Wake or Heartbeat of Spring? Does someone want to target it before you've copied something else? Turn it into a legal target in response. It's just a great card, and it can be basically used and drafted in just about any deck. It's going to do really great work, and it's going to be a really great inclusion into your cubes. As far as the downsides of this card goes, it loses the ability until end of turn, so you can only really do it once per turn unless you're stacking the ability. Having the ability cost 2 also eliminates the ability to net any positive mana for many of the early mana rocks, like your Mana Crypts and your Soul Rings. So this is really great in just about all archetypes. It's really good in multiple archetypes as well. It's really flexible as far as its weaknesses go. So it's going to be an all-around great card, and I can't wait to see it in a lot of our cubes. So that is the top 10 cube cards from Hour of Devastation. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, please go ahead and subscribe. I'm making new videos all the time. So my question to you today is, what is your top card for your cube in Hour of Devastation? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.